laws of Pesach, and we're on Siman Tuf Ayin Gimel 473, and we are in the middle of the Mishnah Berurah. We're going to start on Sif Katan Gimel, and we're talking about Havdallah. Havdallah during the Seder. So if Pesach comes out on Saturday night, which this year the second day of Pesach starts on Saturday night, in addition to making Kiddush, which is, as we mentioned, the first cup of wine of the 4 cups for the Seder, you also have to make Havdallah, because Shabbos is ending, and even though it's not the weekday, because we still have a second day of Pesach, nevertheless, we have to make Havdallah for Shabbos. And the order that we do it is we have a combined Havdallah and Kiddush, and the order is Yak Nahaz, and we'll see what that is in a second. Gimel, what's Yak Nahaz? The first blessing we make is Bori Priya Gafen for the cup of Kiddush. Then we say Kiddush, the blessing that sanctifies the day of Pesach. Then we do Ner, the candle for Havdallah. The Hainu Birchas Bori Marei Ha'esh. V'Havdallah Uzman. Then we make the bracha of Havdallah. Hamavdu bin Kodesh L'chol. And then we make Zman. Zman is Shechiyanu, and that's Yak Nahaz. Yain Kiddush Ner Havdallah Zman. Ve'in Mevarchan Al B'Sam. We don't make a blessing on the B'Samim B'chol Motzei Shabbos Liyamtiv. We never make a Borei B'nei B'Samim, even though we do it usually Saturday night. We do not make a Borei B'nei B'Samim from Saturday night when it goes into a holiday. V'omrim Havdallah Zum Yishuv K'mo Kiddush. And you say this Havdallah when you are sitting, just like you sit during Kiddush. Okay. Now let's say you forgot to make Havdallah in Kiddush. You forgot it was Saturday night. So those little boxes in the gray in the Haggadah you skipped because you didn't realize it was Saturday night. So when do you make it up? Because you still need to make Havdallah. So the Mechaber says, the Shulchan Aruch says, you should finish the Haggadah until Ga'al Yisrael, which is ended by the second cup, and then you should make Havdallah. So you wouldn't make Havdallah right away, but you would wait until after the second cup. Now let's see what the Mishnah Berurah comments on that. The Lahavdil take it kishin iskar any yachol. You are not able to make Havdallah right when you remember Shari Havdallah to unakos v'hamavarach tzarach shiyitum. Because when you make Havdallah needs to be made on wine, and when you make Havdallah on wine, you have to drink. So what's the problem with taking an extra glass of wine in the middle of the Haggadah, in the middle of the Seder? Ube'emtza Haggadah aser lahavsik b'shtiya. The reason is because in the middle of the Haggadah, it's prohibited to interrupt with drinking. However, but since the Shulchan Aruch says that if you started the Haggadah, you should wait till Ga'al Yisrael. It sounds like if you didn't actually start the Haggadah yet, start reading about the leaving of Egypt, then you don't have to wait. Ela take if Mosek Kos, right away you should pour a cup. Then you should make the blessing of Havdallah, and then you could drink. But this is only according to the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch. That if the Shulchan Aruch holds that if you have an extra cup of wine during the Seder, you do not make a blessing on it. But according to the Ramah, who Ashkenazic Jews hold like, in Siman Tuf Ayin Daled, and the way we go, the Mavarchan al Kol Kos, V'yitztarach Levarach Alav Bori Priya Gafen, Imkein Nir Kemos Al Kos is the Aser. According to the Ramah, he holds that if you decide to have another cup of wine during the Haggadah, you have to make a blessing on it. Now, why is that problematic? The Ramah says that's problematic because you're supposed to have 4 cups of wine at the Seder. So if in the middle of the Haggadah you decide to have another cup of wine and make a blessing on it, the blessing on the cup and drinking it looks like you're adding on to the mitzvah. You're having 5 cups instead of 4, so you're not allowed to do that. So according to the Ramah, at any point in the Seder, or at least at the beginning of the Seder, you're not supposed to have another cup. So according to the Ramah, you should wait until the end of the Haggadah. Now he says, but there will be another case according to the Ramah. Let's say, when would you not have to make a bracha on a cup of wine during the Seder, on an extra cup? So says the Ramah that if you have in mind, the Mishnah Berurah, if you have in mind, and when you drink the first cup and you say Borei Priya Gafen, that bracha is going to cover any potential cup you're going to have during the Seder, then you don't have to make another bracha if you add an extra cup. So in such a case, if you didn't begin the Haggadah, you would be able to make Havdallah because you would not need to make a Bori Pri Hagafen. So according to the Rama, if you would have to make another Bori Pri Hagafen, it would be like adding on to the cups, and that would be prohibited. But if you had in mind from the beginning that when you said your first Bori Pri Hagafen, then it's going to cover all subsequent cups that you may add, then you'd be able to do it. So if you didn't do that, if you didn't have in mind, it would be prohibited to have an extra cup. Therefore, you can't make Havdallah, and you would have to make Havdallah at the end. Okay. V'im shachach leimer ha'agada b'layla ein lo tashlumin klal dichsi bavor zeh b'shah shematzu marim nachon l'fanacha im shachach leimer kiddush b'layla dino kidlael. So he says if you forgot, let's say, so we're talking about forgetting to say Havdallah. So how do we say in the end? If you forgot to say Havdallah during Kiddush, so if you did not start the Haggadah yet, so if you had in mind that when you made your first Bori Pri Hagafen that's going to cover all subsequent cups, then you could make Havdallah before you start the Haggadah. Now, if you did not have that in mind, you should wait till after the Haggadah, after you make the blessing of Gal Yisrael, and then after that you can make Havdallah on a new cup of wine and make the blessing on that. Now, what if you forgot to say the Haggadah at night? You just forgot to talk about the leaving of Egypt at the Seder. You're too busy eating chicken and looking for the Afikomen, and you forgot to talk about the Seder. So there's nothing you can do about it because it says, you only fulfill the mitzvah, it says Bavor Zeh, you only fulfill the mitzvah of talking about the leaving of Egypt at the Seder in front of matzah and maror. Okay, let's do one more Mishnah Berurah, then stop. So he says, when we are making up the Haggadah, the Havdallah, what do we say? We say Bori Pri Hagafen, and we say on the second cup, and we say the blessing on the candle, and then we make the blessing of Havdallah. Let's say you're in the middle of your meal at the Seder, and you remember you didn't say Havdallah. You have to stop eating right away and make Havdallah. You don't have to make a second blessing on Bori Pri Hagafen because you're in the middle of the meal, and the blessing that you made on Bori Pri Hagafen on the second cup covers it. So I just want to correct what I said earlier. What I said earlier was that after you say, when you make Havdallah after Ga'al Yisrael, I said you make Bori Pri Hagafen. So what the Mishnah Berurah is saying here is that's not true. If you already made the blessing of Bori Pri Hagafen on the second cup, when you make Havdallah, you do not need to make another Bori Pri Hagafen. Unless you didn't have in mind to drink during the meal. So if when you made the second cup, you drank the second cup, you had in mind to cover drinking during the meal, then you do not make a Bori Pri Hagafen during Havdallah because you already made a bracha. But if you did not have that, or if you had in mind not to drink during the meal, then you would need another Bori Pri Hagafen. Let's say you're in the middle of benching and you remember you didn't do Havdallah. So then you bench and you can make Havdallah on that cup. Let's say you only remember to do Havdallah after you drank the third cup. Then wait till the end of Hallel and the Haggadah, and then on the fourth cup you make Havdallah. Let's say you don't remember that you forgot Havdallah until after the fourth cup of wine. Then you make Havdallah on the fifth cup. You make a Bori Pri Hagafen on that. Because after you had the fourth cup of wine, you already planned not to say Havdallah anymore. Okay, so let's stop here, but let's just review for a second. We said that if a person forgets Havdallah, so the Shulchan Aruch says if you forget Havdallah in Kiddush, that before you start the Haggadah, you can make Havdallah. But we said only if during the first cup of wine, when you said Bori Pri Hagafen, you intended that bracha should cover all of the subsequent drinking that you may have. If you did not have that in mind, then you have to wait until after the Haggadah, after Ga'al Yisrael, then you can make Havdallah. And if when you made the second cup, you made Bori Pri Hagafen on the second cup, you had in mind to cover drinking, let's say during the meal, then you would make Havdallah and not make a Bori Pri Hagafen. And if you did not have that in mind, if you had in mind that you would not be drinking during the meal, then you would make another Borei Pri Hagafen with Havdallah. So the question of whether you make another Borei Pri Hagafen when you make Havdallah all depends if you had in mind when you were making the Borei Pri Hagafen on the first, second, third, or fourth cups, if you had in mind or not that it would cover subsequent drinking during the rest of the Seder. Okay, so I know it's very confusing. So the best course of action is to not forget Havdallah during Kiddush of the Seder. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.